Financial wellness. Reach out to them for advice at 855-DON-GINO. And now back to your hosts, Don Getling and Gino Franti.
People need to do inspections, and they tend to delay the speed at which they do the inspections, and that could cause some problems going down the road.
Yes, definitely. So one thing, as we were talking about in inspections, is you want to inspect early on in the transaction. You really want to make sure that you hire the right inspectors also. For example, if a lot of times I represent a lot of sellers in my practice, and I see what the buyer's agents who represent a lot of the buyers do. And sometimes they show up very late in the inspection period with just a general inspection, which then finds other problems. And then they determine, oh, well, now we need to go and dive deeper to find out if there's more or what exactly they found. Well, the problem with that is that the seller does not necessarily have to give you additional time. And the buyer may be up against a wall and essentially will have to make a decision if they're not given any more time. Either they want to proceed with a property that they don't have enough information, or they can maybe try to scramble at the last minute to get it done.
So tell me a little bit about what kind of inspections. You mentioned a general inspection. So a general inspector comes out, spends a few hours at the house?
Definitely a few hours. I have, in my practice, have seen general inspectors come and spend an hour on a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot home, which is almost impossible to actually fully inspect. Other things that I recommend to my clients is, depending on the property, is a sewer inspection. Being that we're in Southern California, there's a lot of movement. There's roots and different things. You may want to double check the sewer depending on the age of the home and what actually is there. If the home has a chimney, you may want to have the chimney inspected depending on the age of the home. If it's a very old home with a brick chimney, being that we have earthquakes in Southern California, that's something you may want to look at. Also, the HVAC systems. They're extremely expensive to repair or replace. And if an HVAC system is not performing properly, you definitely want to have it checked by someone who knows what they're looking at.
Now, I've been in the industry for a long time, and you just came up with a list of problems that are deal-killing problems for buyers. So why would you do that as a real estate agent?
I don't care if the deal gets killed. My duty is to represent the buyer and advocate for the buyer. And I kind of take that from my legal background my obligation is not to make the sale. My obligation is to make sure that my buyers are satisfied with the property they are buying, so that when they close escrow, they have enough knowledge that they're happy with what they're purchasing.
Yeah, so one of the things is you'll never sacrifice what they need to know. It's an educational thing, right? At the end of the day, you just want them to know what they're getting into, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, because plenty of times I could say, well, I need a new roof, and I still want to buy the house.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, I just need to know that that's what I'm going to be spending my money on.
Exactly, and typically we'll have a list of saying, here are things you may want to know down the road. The roof only has so many years left, or maybe there's pool work that needs to be done if there's a pool, or different things, but that person has it already, a knowledge of what exactly in the next several years they may or may not have to deal with financially.
Okay, so we've identified that you're incredibly aggressive when it comes to buyers as far as getting inspections, making sure you identify the problems that they may encounter going forward, and then deciding with an educational standpoint whether it's a good idea for them to move forward, whether they have the funds to take care of it or not, etc. So that's what we did for buyers. So now what's different for sellers? And we're with Stephen DeVore of Sterling Realty Group in Encino, California, and now we're going to discuss what you do for sellers that's a little bit different as well.
Now, as a licensed California attorney, I really take, when I represent sellers, extremely seriously. And that's not that I don't take representing buyers seriously, but what happens with what the sellers do a lot of times can end up in litigation.
I was going to say, not because California is not a litigated state,
no,
right?
No, not at all. No, we don't. Nobody sues nobody in California. Yeah. The first question when I was in law school, everybody used to ask the question to the professors, can you sue for that? And the answer is yes. You can sue for anything in the state of California. Now, will you win? That's another story. But you could sue for anything in the state of California. So as a result, the most litigious issues that generally come up when people purchase homes has to deal with the disclosures. And as what the sellers have to do is the sellers generally in a transaction will disclose what they know about the property. And
you use the word generally there, so elaborate on generally.
Well, there's certain things you need to disclose, and there's certain things you not necessarily need to disclose. obviously, if you change the light bulb, you don't need to disclose that. But if you had your roof repaired, you generally want to disclose that.
Yeah, I know that one of the common ones we used to see on the disclosure reports were, and that's usually called a transfer disclosure statement, right?
Excellent, yes.
And we used to see all the time is, we painted the house.
Yeah.
Seems simple, but what are you covering up?
I think exactly. And paint, what the reason it's very important is well, why'd you paint? Did you paint because there was dirt, or did you paint because you fixed cracks in the ceiling and there may have been structural issues prior? Or there could have been a leak, and if you paint over it, they may not know where that leaky area was. Litigation comes from failing to disclose. One thing that I've actually in my practice when I was representing plaintiffs was, I'll give you a short example. My clients at the time purchased a home, and the seller disclosed that there were no leaks or water issues with the home. And subsequently, after they bought the home, they found out that there were major leaks with the home. The first thing we looked at were the disclosures, and we determined, the seller disclosed there were no leaks with the home. So the next step was we decided to go around the neighborhood and ask all the neighbors, are you aware if they had any problems with the home? Well, lo and behold, the next door neighbor and the neighbor across the street, after asking them, says, yes, every year that seller used to put a tarp over the back of his house because he used to have a problem with water coming in. Well, he failed to disclose that and ended up paying a lot of money in a lawsuit because the plaintiffs had to repair all of that damage that the seller failed to disclose.
And I'm sure that when it comes down to things like that, Stephen, that whoever the arbitrator is or the judge or the jury, they're not going to look very favorably upon a seller that had knowledge and failed to disclose to a buyer on a $500,000 transaction.
Definitely. And one thing is there's generally no insurance for failing to disclose. So when the person sells their property and they're sued by the new owner, that's money that's coming directly out of their pocket in most instances. Oh,
that's a really, really great tip, Stephen, because I didn't realize that, most of the time people say, well, I have errors and omissions insurance, but that's not an error or an omission. There
are certain cases when there is insurance coverage, but generally there is none.
Right. It's almost like, certain people when they do, they've got insurance, but if they do something illegal, it's not covered.
Exactly. And really failing to disclose. So what I always tell my clients is, when in doubt, over disclose. There's almost never been a lawsuit for anybody saying, well, you disclosed too many things. Let the buyer look at everything. If you say, well, we painted or we fixed things, and you're saying, well, should we disclose it? I always tell my clients, put it on there, and this way you've given them that information ahead of time so that if there is a problem, they can't come back and say, well, you really didn't give us enough information.
So again, even from the seller's side, Stephen takes the same stance of educating the buyer and allowing them to make the decision with all the appropriate information about the house. Ultimately, you've got an asset to sell. It needs to be inspected, but it's best to disclose and give them all the information up front so they can make an educated decision.
Definitely.
So, Stephen, tell us how to get a hold of you, because ultimately it is a different approach. We talk about real estate on the show every single week, and we don't talk a lot about these pitfalls, right? We always talk about the happy moments. We don't talk about the pitfalls. We don't talk about the difficulties in a transaction, and we definitely don't talk about bringing to light the things that are wrong with a home, and we've done that today. So please tell them how to get a hold of you if they're looking for somebody to dig in a little deeper.
Well, let me give you my website. My website is www.sterlingsells.com and STERLINGSELLS.com.
Okay.
My email is sdevore, SDEVORE @sterlingsells.com. And the best phone number is my office phone at 818-492-4700. Let me give you that one more time. It's 818-492-4700.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen. I really appreciate you coming in and giving us a little different snapshot of the back world of what's going on in real estate transactions. And maybe you'll hang out in the studio here with us today with the wonderful Bob Keller joining us next on the Don Gino Real Estate and Finance Show to bring you up to speed on what's going on in the city of Santa Clarita. Who's better than the mayor to do that?